can start. So welcome to I think it's now the second or third Drupal AI online meetup. We try to give some overview about new topics and new stuff which is getting hot. And yeah, maybe I posted in the chat a link. It's to a shortening thingy. It's s.drupal.de/ai2. There it leads to the issue for this today, the meeting or meetup, online meetup. So you can say hi there. So we can give you also a credit for that. Because I think it's always important as more people share it, that we have also here some to see who is doing what and where is it. And yes. So the first topic, maybe Jamie, we can sprint into it and also invite others to join us on the stage because we wanted to talk a bit about the Driesnote and what was said there and what everybody feels now and what the expectations maybe. So yeah, has everybody seen it or maybe already has some questions or some inputs they want to share? Maybe I just will start because I think it was one of the best Driesnote since some time, so it was really inspiring and was quite nice to see what's already working and where we can head to, and that we get also a lot of new people maybe on board which are more related to this Wix and the smaller page builders and all of this, that we get more people into Drupal again who really don't know about site building or how it's done or how we can work with it, but still has the possibility to now talk to these AI agents, multiple ones, and make things happen. I really enjoyed this. Maybe Jamie, what's your thought about this? I mean, you have a lot of thoughts about that, I guess, but maybe you can give your highlights.
Hello, Vivek. Yeah, there's a few people here who I recognize. Jay. Hello. Kristen, cool. Hello again. Yeah, I think as Nico said, this is not going to be really like just me giving a presentation or Nico giving a presentation. Scott will have a presentation about some really cool stuff that he's been doing with the AI search module. So I really recommend taking a look at that. And that's going to be more like a walkthrough.
Yeah.
But anyone in chat, you can just join us if you want to join in and talk. If you have any questions, especially people who are there. Could we just...
So if there are questions also...
Well, yeah. Did you? Who has everyone seen the Driesnote?
Yeah, a lot of people. No, Dave, you have to. David, you have then to watch it. I think it was quite nice. I think most of them seen it.
Cool.
Should we recap what was presented there and then maybe have some...
Cool. Okay. Yeah. So the Driesnote was something that me and Marcus, particularly the AI side of it, was something that we have been working on for a while, and we've been keeping it secret so they could get announced. Marcus is joining us. That's cool. And yeah, basically it was a we decided to announce that AI was going to be in the next version of Drupal's Drupal CMS. So Drupal Starshot is now going to be known as Drupal CMS. And it's going to be the main version of Drupal that Drupal.org pushes for. So there's going to be Drupal Core, which is what we call Drupal today, and Drupal CMS is going to be an application that does more out of the box. It's going to be a lot easier to install. You can install it in your browser, so you can test it more easily. But because it's this newer version, we're allowed to be a little bit more innovative. The core has to be nice, lean, has to work really well. But Nico, it might be good if you can mute yourself.
Sorry.
Well, I'm glad you think this is awesome. Yeah, so our tools is that we got involved is some AI tools, and we were spending quite a lot of time talking about like the different ways that we would do it. But what we end up on is these agents that you can use a chatbot to help you create content types, edit fields, move fields around. And the aim is this persona we had of Sarah, the marketeer, who doesn't know how to use Drupal, not a programmer, being able to do a lot herself. And so we worked, so we showed this demo of her gradually being able to build out a Drupal site by just talking to this AI agent. So yeah, how did you feel about it when you first saw it?
So I also liked storytelling, and everything was quite nice. So we go through the story from simple to more complex things, and I really enjoyed it. It was really all of the people I talked to afterwards. Also, it was quite uplifting, and it was like fresh, and that a lot of people had the feeling, oh, there is something new and exciting times coming, and it's not like that we have nothing new to show. So this was the main thing I find really important and nice.
Yeah, Kristen said people joked out we were out of jobs. Yeah, I've been exploring. I'm going to be at Acquia Engage next week. I'm going to be talking in New York, and we're going to be talking a bit about the AI stuff. And there's a little term that we quite liked, which was yeah, our goal. Yeah, it's not about putting Drupalists out of a job. It's about bringing more people in to love Drupal. I just really like that as a concept of it's not really about cutting our jobs out, but it's about expanding the number of people who can use Drupal. There was someone said like we talk about how Drupal is open source and available to everyone, and we talk a lot about the freedom that comes with free software, but to some degree, Drupal is gated by something that really only developers can use. There used to be a concept of a site builder, and a site builder can do quite a lot, but they'll always need a Drupal developer to at least do the theming layer. So there's an element that Drupal is kind of open source and free software, and it obviously is by the definition of free software, but there's a sense in which there's a lot of people excluded. So I feel like this is less about cutting out Drupal jobs and more about bringing more people in to this group of people that can use Drupal well. I quite like that way of thinking about it. And in reality, like what will likely happen is everyone who knows Drupal, even the front-end developers, will tend to focus on more harder and harder and more interesting problems that generate a lot more value, rather than focusing on kind of the stuff that we have to do the same thing over and over and over again. So I think it's likely to increase all of our work rather than reduce it.
Ritesh also said in the chat, it feels like sneak peek of what the future looks like. Innovation is what describes it best. Looking forward to meet you in Acquia Engage, so he will also be at Acquia Engage, so you will meet him. And yeah, what I really find quite funny when the first AI informations at the Driesnote was at in virtual, like he said, the first thing what's possible, and then it was like really silent. Everybody's looking at each other. Oh, what does it mean? Do I not have a job? But it's not like that. So it's really like that we get a lot of new people into it, and because those people, in my opinion, who would not hire an agency or something or a developer to do it, would go now to Wix or some other smaller page builder thing and something do it on their own. But now they have the chance also easily to do it then also with Drupal. And this is the big benefit I see, this big thing that they will grow then also. And after some years when they have some value and something, they still need somebody to build more complex stuff or something. And then also the agencies or developers are needed again. So this is the exciting thing I find.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I'm looking forward to meeting you too, Ritesh. Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn if you want to like make sure that we connect. But yeah, the other thing is that I think with the future of AI, AI is very, very intelligent and can do a lot of things, but it's also a commodity. Everyone has access to the same models. Everyone can get ChatGPT or Claude, and it's not that expensive. You don't need that much money to be able to use it a little bit, especially through Bing, Copilot. There's a lot of places where you can access this kind of intelligence entirely for free. So although it's very clever what it can do, the baseline of it is a commodity that every single human has access to. So how you become important, how you add value, how your organization add values, how you compete, is to do what you can add to AI. It's not just AI itself. And the biggest thing, there's going to be two things that you're going to need. One is like your own knowledge and understanding of an area, how to do things, what's in your brain. But the other thing is the data that you look after and you work with. And Drupal is primarily a content management system. It's not a website building tool. In fact, a lot of Drupal sites, particularly the higher end ones, the front end is a React front end, and we've got headless Drupal, where Drupal is only doing content management. So I think it's super unlikely that as AI takes off, we'll ever get a place where we're going to get to a place where Drupal is completely unnecessary. I mean, it could be that we fall behind some of the other content management systems, but it won't be that a system for storing data and content will be irrelevant. I think in the future of super intelligent AI. So I think the future looks really bright for Drupal. Yeah, we posted on LinkedIn, but yesterday I was at the European Commission, and they were doing a hackathon, and they were doing the hackathon with the AI module, and they were using the AI module, they were using the Amazon AWS Bedrock provider, and they were using the CK editor assistants. And they had this goal where they had they had like 4 things they had to implement. So one was like changing the tone. The other was doing I think it's flesh reading score, like a score of how easy it is to read. What was so cool about it is that they had these 4 tasks. Every one of the teams did way more than those 4. They had their own ideas. Some of them had a huge number of ideas. Some of them implemented that day. And someone from Amazon was there, and their response to one of the presentations at the end was, "Wow, you did that all in 6 hours?" And there was this energy in the room. There was so much excitement with this hackathon. They were getting into these modules, extending it, doing amazingly cool things with AI. There was a big focus. A lot of people wanted to like make the content more accessible, so they tried to do like they did the like explain it like I'm 5 stuff. Tried to look at it for children who were like at school trying to learn about the EU and the European Commission. And there was just so much excitement with what they could do. And it really felt in that room like Drupal has had a rough couple of years. It used to be ginormous. It used to be if you said you were a Drupal agency on your website, you just get leads just flying in just because you worked with Drupal and nothing else. And I think we've all seen that's not the case anymore. People don't really care that much about the tool you use. But the energy in that room was like, I think Drupal's got a really long future ahead of it, particularly in the AI space. So that's one thing, yeah, I took from that.
Have you been at this team? This got the second place on the EU on the hackathon, because I saw your other picture also for on the LinkedIn post. Or have you been just in between and helping out the people?
Yeah, so me and Marcus, we were given a squad, but then we found out they're using. I didn't know we didn't know much about what it was going to be like until only really this Monday. So we were given a squad to actually compete, and then we found out that the competition was primarily about learning, can you install the AI module and the Bedrock thing, and then can you build these extensions? And very quickly we got kicked out of our team because it would be a very unfair advantage to have Marcus like sat on a team there competing with all these other people. So we got moved to a jury and support team.
Okay.
The AWS Bedrock module is relatively new and sponsored by Amazon. So we're a bit nervous about like how it would go, but yeah, there was a couple of little improvements people suggested, but it actually worked really smoothly. But Marcus's job and my job was sort of like run around chatting to people, helping in a way that doesn't give them an advantage, but like making sure that we cut, any game-changing bugs we would have solved straight away and that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Maybe there are some questions we can answer, or Jamie or somebody else can also jump in. I would have one because like this also already came up multiple times. So like there is these agents. The agents have some ability like know more about fields or something, and then you can ask, please change the name of this content type so from event to sessions. I don't know, so it does it. My main question is, this use some AI in the background, some GPT or Llama. It doesn't matter, I guess. So it is some LLM behind. this is the first thing. It's true, I think. This is the thing, how it works nowadays. My question would be, could we, as a Drupal community, make an own LLM which knows all these things, which is a small model which we can ship or have somewhere, that we don't need to send the data to another OpenAI or something else, so have it on our own setup or maybe on Drupal.org hosted or something.
Yeah, so one of the other module maintainers is called Michael Gao, or SEO Gao, and he did a lot of work initially on the AI search module, porting the search API AI stuff into Drupal, and he has been experimenting with some small open source models. So I think it's Gemma 7b and Microsoft Phi. And these are quite small. They need like 1.8 gigabytes of RAM. They don't need a graphics card necessarily. I think they can actually, some of them can fit on your phone. And because they're so much smaller, apparently, although we haven't tried it ourselves yet, they're a lot easier to fine tune. So generally speaking, I have been told fine tuning is a waste of time. I haven't tried it out myself, but I've never, I try to speak to a lot of people who do stuff with AI at a very high level, and almost no one is saying fine tuning helps. With GPT-2, it did. So I know some people who did startups around GPT-2 and did fine tuning, but by 4, it's kind of a waste of time. But these smaller models, what I've been told is that they actually are much better with fine tuning. You don't need very much data to fine tune them a lot. So we are thinking of exploring, maybe in time for Singapore, taking something like Microsoft Phi and fine tuning it on the kinds of prompts that these agents would need. And to see how good that would be, because then we might be able to. I have seen that you can actually have a version of like Olama, I think. Yeah, you can have a version of Olama, which I think hosts the model inside the browser. So when we're doing the web assembly, I think it is, the stuff that hosts Drupal inside your browser for Starshot, you can also host the model there. Yeah, we could maybe have a Drupal LLM that is fine-tuned. One of the things I'm hoping to do soon, although there's so much work to do, so it's hard to know how to prioritize our time. And so we have some agencies who are thinking of collaborating with us on this. But one thing I was hoping to do is we already log all of our prompts. So we really want to try and push forward an evaluations framework in the AI module, something that allows us to test how good these prompts are to some goal. Like, in the chatbot, maybe it's a thumbs up or thumbs down, or if you're doing automation, did it succeed compared to what a human would have done? And then to be able to export the good ones, make sure there's no PII in it or anything. And then hopefully we have this idea that maybe we could build up a data set. Like if agencies get a whole bunch of people testing it, try out loads of prompts, get loads of responses, and then get the good ones. We could get a data set that we could use to train something to support at least the features in the core of Drupal CMS. Yeah, and the other idea we have is maybe one of the Drupal agencies, like Acquia, maybe the DA, strike up a deal with some of the AI providers, and have a relatively secure place. Yeah. The AI. So the AI logging submodule does log your prompts and stays in your database. I think for the for this fine-tuning thing, we need some way of cleaning it up and making sure we export it in the format necessary to do fine-tuning. So the AI logging thing just logs everything, and we'll probably need something that does a little bit more than just logging, like stores some information about how good it was, bad things. We haven't figured out yet exactly what we do, and also there's a lot of stuff we need to look at in terms of privacy. But the AI logging one doesn't export anything, obviously, right now.
But Scott, you can really jump in and answer it also directly.
Yeah. Feel free to chat. By the way, Scott.
And maybe Hector had the question. Oh, let's go on. Yeah, Scott.
Yeah, I was just going to say on a bit further on that one that the alternative to training or fine tuning, which you can do today, is kind of what I'll be talking about a little bit later. I'm focused more on the sort of front end content side of things of a website, but there's no reason you can't use this this same approach that we use in AI search and some of the concepts we'll talk through today to feed it, let's say, documentation from Drupal. And when you feed documentation from Drupal and say, now I want to do this, here's the documentation for it, can you do it for me? It's going to come up with a much better and more accurate answer than without that. So you can use a combination of methods to make existing models work really well. And you don't need to use a model where you're sending your data to somewhere. So even within the AI module, you can use some of the sub-modules for instructions to spin up Olama on your machine and run your queries through that, so that it never actually goes to OpenAI or somewhere else. So if you are sort of data conscious and worried about having your data get sent somewhere, you can turn off your internet and do it completely locally if you want to. That's definitely achievable already.
Cool. Yeah, I just want to repeat from Hector the question. Will you all be discussing AI text content creation at all, I would say, from the Drupal site? For example, Drupal node creation based on prompts added to the Drupal site. So I think there have been a lot of, maybe Jamie, I think we talked about it already.
Yeah, so we
give some insight about that.
Yeah, we're trying to stay away from that too much. So we tend to, rather than generating content from a prompt, it'll be more we generate content from another data source. So for example, we've got examples where you can upload a PDF of recipes from a recipe book and then generate nodes that are recipes in Umami, the kind of the standard version of Drupal. You could imagine I've got a product library and I'm setting up a commerce site for the first time. So you would like add in this product library and it would generate a load of products there. Or like mixing and matching. We've explored things like using the agents to take a YouTube video you've done and then create a blog post out of it. Also the other way around, if you kind of use some of the video models that can make little avatars. So we're more focused on helping you create content and helping you create content from other sources and mixing and matching it, rather than pure lots and lots of nodes from a prompt. Partly because we've got this responsible AI approach, and so we want to be really careful about like how we use AI. That it's not, the goal isn't that it is we're going to be using it as a tool to promote sort of poor quality content. But the tools, you would be able to use some of them for that, and certainly there will be lots of use cases where that is actually a really good thing, where you want to generate content just from a prompt. One of my friends is making like a video game, like a quiz video game, and was going to use Drupal, has been using Drupal as a backend to store all of the quiz material. And then it means that you can like download like expansion packs for questions. But what he was really interested in is like using Drupal as a source of helping you like create new question packs around a new thing. So that's another place where you can create content from Drupal. Yeah. And the places where you do this kind of stuff is we are, okay, sounds good. Yeah, we are planning on, we're trying to explore this because funding is a little bit complicated at the moment. It's we're building a lot of stuff. We've spending about 1.5 years on this, and we've just been releasing a lot of it for free. So we're trying to explore, like there's some stuff that we're sitting on right now that we could just release to do with like migration and to do with something called Figma to Drupal, like building Drupal themes. And we haven't quite decided, like, are we trying to really fight for getting some kind of funding or contributions for it, or are we just going to go for it? With everything that's happening with WordPress, having some tools that might make it easier to migrate a site into Drupal very quickly could be beneficial. But if we release it soon, which we might do, the start of it will be this, you could describe it a content migration tool, but it's really a content creation tool that allows you to create content via a variety of sources. So uploading a file, an image, a website, or a prompt, and then that can create either one or multiple nodes. So I think that might be coming soon. And then if we do that, that means you'll be able to like put in a URL of an existing site that you own, click a button, and it'll all add everything into Drupal. So yeah, that's something.
Maybe Anatoly, do you want to ask your question directly? Challenge it.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Actually, I'm quite excited too with what was announced during Driesnote. Definitely something new and fresh, and I really great to hear something like this. But just to stay pragmatic, I wanted to challenge and discuss a couple of questions. First is not really important, but still is the naming. Like Drupal CMS was actually a bit disappointing for me because it's kind of not new. It's just like for the majority, Drupal is CMS, and that's why like making renaming Starshot to CMS for me, like personally thinking that this is the mistake, and it should be like Starshot was something brand new, so, and it's actually from my point of view should go in a better direction. Another question, I will ask 3 questions, and maybe randomly you can just share your point of view on these topics. So the name is the first one. The second one is like making Drupal easier, like for the majority, for people who is who can check Drupal new. But this is great, like yeah, to choose Drupal over Wix, to choose Drupal over WordPress or other stuff. But is there a clear vision how to reach out to these people to actually bring them to Drupal? We desperate to get new people in Drupal. We like from year to year we see more and more agencies and Drupal users are getting older and older, and we need new people, and this is great. But I didn't still, maybe I missed something, but I didn't hear the sources of newcomers, how exactly we can reach out to new people and announce it like this. This is Drupal, and it can be simple. It can be better in some options. So this is the second question and challenge. And the third question is Drupal core and its development. Like right now, what I see that during like at least this year, there are 2 main directions where the Drupal community is pushing all the focus, and focus is definitely great. Like one direction is this Drupal CMS and making it simple for content building, for site building. Another option is what is really exciting is Drupal AI, and like this is another point of view. But actually, the development of the technology, like Drupal core itself, it looks like there is no focus at all and no leader at all. This is my point of view. Could it be like that we focus on like new options and forget about the development of core, and we can fall behind as it was like with Drupal 7 when it fell behind in technology way? 2 wide questions, but really curious to hear your point of view on these topics.
Yeah, so Kristen mentioned that the name was vetted with non-Drupal and non-tech people who are the target audience. She said, I agree, rather bland and boring, but resonated with those folks. Yeah, I mean, I love Starshot. I wanted to call like our AI stuff Starforge. I got really into like Knights of the Old Republic, the video game, and there's like the evil Sith Empire, the Starforge, like a Sith semi-sentient, maybe, I don't know, magic forge that generates millions and millions of rocket ships. And it excited me, the idea of like we're using AI to create Starshot. So we had Starforge. I've heard people talk about, complain they don't like Starshot because it's too small. It's just building one rocket. And some people have said we shouldn't be doing Starshot, we should be doing Moonbase, where the goal is to go to the stars, and we should be thinking bigger. So I think in our Drupal community, we've got all these fun names that we want to use. But you know, I've been humbled a lot actually, because since getting into all the stuff I've been doing in the AI module, it started for me. No, the Starshot stuff started for me with showing the agents work that we've been doing to some people at Acquia during Acquia Engage. And going to Acquia Engage was a strange experience for me and my business partner, because we're very techy and this is very marketing-y. And all these words, I had no idea what they meant. I mean, I vaguely know about ROI, but I would never use ROI in most of my normal conversations with anyone. and there were all these tools and all these conversations, and the way they talked was very different. There was all these feelings that they were pushing. And I've started learning from them since working with them a lot about marketing, how it works, what the purpose is, and how to do it well, and started to try and apply it in my own life. And yeah, you do have to go a lot, not on how you feel about it, but like what goal you're trying to achieve. And yeah, I think they've written about Drupal CMS and where it came from. And yeah, I don't know very much about the development of Drupal core. I'm involved in the AI track, but very much just that. Like even the whole creation of Starshot Drupal CMS, I have no leadership role there. I'm just focusing on the AI stuff. I'm mostly led by what Dries wants at the moment. There's just too much with AI. There's so many ways in which we could do things in Starshot, and so it's very hard for me to know where to focus. So it's been really helpful having some guidance with Dries, who has a better understanding of the target audience. But to be honest, I think the thing that's going to stop Drupal core development is going to be people using Drupal less. The more people use Drupal, the more Drupal core development there'll be. And Drupal usage has been not as big as it used to be. Yeah, I think things will get better.
Maybe there is an answer also from Kristen, that there is the marketing team will have campaigns coming out, and there is the phase 1 where people should be more familiar with Drupal, and then there's phase 2 where they gather the band together for a lot of other companies, and where we go to non-Drupal tech events, which then I think is really also a good thing. Nowadays we are in the same soup and everybody is just about like, but if we go out to other conferences and see this is Drupal, this is what we already can do and how we can help you, this will also help, I think, us. Maybe my 2 cents about that, about the name. First, I also think Starshot is good, but then I think it was already at some presentation at DrupalCon when the first people say Starship. First, somebody says Starshot, then somebody says Starship. I said, why Starship now? What happens? But I also like the name really. Also, I like the name that it's fresh, that it's something new, and we get away from the oldness that people say, oh, Drupal, this is the old PHP thingy, and I used it back then in Drupal 6 and it was not good, and something like this, and I remember it, so that it's more like, oh, it's a new start. I really like this idea, but I see also the other way. So this is, I have no. I'm not quite sure if this or that for now, so I'm quite not yeah. I'm still don't know which is better, but yeah.
And one thing Dries mentioned when he announced everything is that the focus isn't on Wix and Squarespace. The focus with Sarah is that she's the head of marketing for small business. So she's not like she's not got a team of 100 developers at her disposal. She's not enterprise. She's smaller, but she's bigger than what Wix and Squarespace aim for. And so the goal of Starshot wasn't ever to go that far. Now, I believe with AI, we can go even further. But I think what we need to do is prove that it can actually be competitive with Squarespace of easy use before we start figuring out how to market to those people, I think. Because I think whether or not we can get Drupal to a place where it will be something as easy to use as Squarespace, it's not something that we can just know to be true if we just put more effort into it. It's not like we'll know, oh, in 6 months, Drupal tech is definitely as good as Squarespace. I think it's something that we're going to have to explore, try out. I personally think we can achieve it. I think even in 6 months, we might be able to achieve it. But once we've proven it, then we can think more about if we're going to market to like that level of audience, that long tail. But that's not the goal right now. Yeah,
just
Kristen, tell me
to
if I'm wrong about that.
just to add to that a bit, like and it kind of leads on from Dave Golden's question on whether the AI can read config. I think it gives us an advantage the way that Drupal is set up in such a structured way that if we can do the same things like what Jamie was saying about like Figma to Drupal, or the sort of the flashy sort of front end side of things, if we can tie that together really well with Drupal's heavily structured and sort of systematic way of doing things, I think we'll come out better than a much less structured sort of CMS will, and ultimately be more beneficial than it could be with another CMS. because we have all that information in config. For example, at my agency, we also do WordPress sites, and there's a tool that kind of tries to do like content types in fields called advanced custom fields, and it has the ability sort of to export the configuration to JSON, but it's not nearly to the same level as Drupal, where the entire CMS and everything you configure and everything you do is sort of part of the code and therefore readable by an AI bot or an agent or whatever it is. To be able to take some action on it. So I think we do have an advantage to be able to take it further than other CMSs could. Just 2 cents.
Yeah, this I think is also the main benefit, that we have it in core, like in Drupal CMS, that we have really everything we need for good agents and everything described. Everything is baked in and not put on top on a you have an extra module which is not working the way like it should, or not required. This is main benefit, I think, for Drupal also. Agree. Maybe there is also maybe that third question. Have you addressed it already? And also the Christian also, if you want to be on stage, also don't hesitate to join us.
Also Dave, so in terms of how is it aware of the site config? So at the moment, the way the assistants work is there is a like pre-prompt that you can control, you can change for how that chatbot functions. And you can put tokens in there. So you can provide a lot of information about the user through those tokens. So you can talk about like the user name, what path they're on, things about the site, and you can bring that into the assistant. We're definitely wanting to think a lot about the structure of assistants. So there's been this really cool framework come out by OpenAI called Swarm that specifies how agent should work and has this really simple definition of what an agent is. And an agent is simply, they call them routines. An agent is a system prompt. So it's just like instructions, usually in a routine, like do this, 1, 2, do this, 3, 4, do this. And then a series of functions that it's able to use. And then you have, and then it has the ability to pass on information from one agent to the other. So you would have like with our ones, we tend to have like a project manager or triage agent. So a user query comes in, an AI looks at that and then figures out like, okay, this is what the user wants. Here's all the agents and tools and functions I have available to me. Which one do I pass it on to? And they'll probably pass it on to like an agent. And at the moment we've done it where it's very, very just like there is a single field triage agent and then all the functionality of fields. And there's a single content type one and all the functionality of that. But we're thinking we're probably going to expand it a little bit so that when you start designing your agents, you'll think of it you'll think of it like you would design a UI. So let's say views. Instead of having one views project manager agent and everything views can do, we'll probably have something where you look at the UI in views, you've got like the field section, the filter section, the sort section, the advanced section, relationships, the general settings, the display settings. And we'd probably have like an agent for each of those. And so the overall views agent will be able to like listen to a whole bunch of those. You will like take a query and then figure out like, well, we have to do this first and then this and then this. Tell it to this other agent that's really good at implementing fields. So we'll have a structure like that. And we're thinking is we'd probably have an agent that has the ability to go into Drupal and pull out some contextual information that it has permissions to do so. So it'd be something, rather than us just hard coding into the assistant, this is the context that you have. We would have a tool so that agents can ask, oh, what page am I on right now? What permissions does this person have? What role do they have? And other kind of contextual information, other kind of site config. But again, heavily locked down by the permissions that we have in Drupal. That the agents, they have permissions and you have to assign them a role and they can only do, well, we have a rule basically when you ask it to do something, it checks both your permissions and the agent's permissions before it's allowed to do it. So I hope that answers the first bit of your question. Now, about when it can see code, I mean, it can't see code now for obvious reasons. It's running in the code. So the code can't really see itself, especially it can't see like comments. But it could see like a RAG database, vector database of all of the code. So we could have something where inside a Drupal site, we store a database of all the code so it could read it. Jay, who I thought joined, also knows Drupal Ninja. He's been working a lot on his platform. He's calling Drupal X and Drupal AI. And there he does loads of similar stuff to what we're doing, but focusing on drush commands. And with what he does, his AI agents can read the code because they're usually working in drush. They're working, I think, with Git. They're sort of playing around with building code. Whereas what we're doing is we're focusing on building AI agents that live within Drupal, and so tend to see things in the database and write to the database. Yeah, it's quite a long answer. There's a few questions that you had there, Dave Golden, but does that help?
Cool. But we have, perfect. So we have now also Kristen on board, and she is at the Starshot Council, so she really can answer our questions, I guess. So maybe you have some insights about Starshot and why the name was chosen? Or more details?
I mean, sure. I mean, I was also kind of disappointed. It's just so boring and sad. And also Dries was like, oh, and we're going to retire the, initiative name of Starshot, I think in January or something. I'm like, no, we can't. At least let us use it internally. So I have a feeling people will just keep using it, at least, in the community. So I'm all for that, actually, despite what he says. But yeah, I mean, there's an issue that has a lot of detail. I could dig it up, or did someone dig it up? I don't remember if they put it here or not. But yeah, there was a lot of back and forth on that, and there were some other ideas that weren't as fun as Starshot, but maybe a little bit more interesting than just CMS. But at the end of the day, we're going after people that don't necessarily know what Drupal is, and they hear Drupal and they're like, what's that? Well, it's Drupal CMS. Oh, okay, it's a CMS. Okay, I get it. So, I mean, it's just how marketing works, right? Yeah. But if there's other questions, I guess one thing, Jamie, I know that at our last council meeting, Dries said that you two met and were like, okay, what should be the focus for January? And I know you've got so many irons in the fire. You could do all sorts of fun stuff. But my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, was he's like, let's tidy up the things that you've got pretty solid so that the experience for the end user is at 80% instead of 60% or whatever. Like, let's get that super solid and not worry about adding even more functionality. So does that sound right?
Yeah, I think so. That's what we discussed. Just before I answer that question, I definitely feel like there's going to become a module, or people will start putting things in there like composer files in DDev that will just rename Drupal CMS to Starshot every single time that you do it. I reckon some agencies will do that. I'm sure that will be I mean, that's a kind of a market. If you want to market your agency, go and create a module that does nothing but rename Starshot to for recipe. So everywhere it appears in the site, just change CMS to Starshot. Put like pictures of rockets all over the place, and I'm sure that your module will get traction. Yeah, so in terms of our goals for Starshot, we've got for Starshot and AI, we've got RC1 by Singapore, and then release in January. And so our focus is going to be primarily on tidying things up. So the evaluations framework is the thing I'm particularly excited by. I think it's one of these things, if you're not into AI, evaluations is a boring word, doesn't mean anything. If you've been building AI applications for real clients, very quickly, evaluations is the most exciting thing. It's the funnest thing to do. It's the most impactful thing. And so one of the reasons why we even got started was, we did stuff with the train, with train operating companies, and we were building a delay if your train's delayed, a compensation system for it. And we process those claims for train companies. And we found really quickly that AI could actually look at a ticket and validate that it was valid for that journey, and can do things like pick up on fraudulent tickets, give reasons, escalate things to human agents if it's unsure. It did a lot of really clever stuff. And I could do it once or twice, but proving that to someone or showing someone a demo and it works once isn't really going to go anywhere. So we did the same thing, but we did it across like a good 200-300 claims. that humans had checked first, put into our system that we knew were right, and then we got AI to compare it, and we managed to get like 90% automation with about 90% accuracy. And humans aren't perfectly accurate, so we didn't need to get to 100. And that was the thing that sold it. It was like, those stats were really good. And the hope is that we're now going to do an even bigger one with a good 1,000 or 1,500. And the newer models, I reckon, are going to get really close to 100% from the little testing I've done myself. So this evaluations, we think, is going to become very important for the AI module, anyone doing things with AI, and obviously for Starshot. Because like in that Dries demo, the fields agents are close to 100% if the person knows Drupal and describes it in the Drupal-y way. So if you say, I want to create a content type and add an image field and a this field, etc., it gets really close to 100%. It starts failing a little bit if, it starts working a little bit worse if the person starts using their own language, although we found ways of getting around that. Now with migration, that little migration demo, that was somewhat aspirational because when we recorded it, it was working about 10% of the time. So Marcus was like trying to record that video by clicking generate, rubbish. Okay, try again. We kept doing it over and over again until we got one that worked. But just before Barcelona hit, OpenAI's ChatGPT 01, also known as Strawberry, released. And that now we're looking at is like close to 100% accurate. So we want to be able to prove this. So we want to build a framework for proving it. This framework will definitely link with the AI logging that Scott mentioned. And so we might be able to use this to generate training data for our own model. And one thing we are going to explore, hopefully by then, is also this open source one. We want to see if we can do that. They're kind of linked. And then we're going to work with the UX Starshot. I'm in early conversations with some people in the Drupal CMS UX track. And we're talking to them about ways in which we can test this in some kind of more scientific manner with people that they can get to test it, and hopefully show that we're like 80-90% there. And then once we've got this, it's going to be a lot easier to add new features, because when we add new features, we have this framework and understanding of, okay, this is what we're going to add in Starshot. We test it first. When it hits a certain amount, then we put it in. It's partly because the AI module already has all of these cool advanced features anyway that are less tested. So it's kind of nice to like, let's focus on Starshot being aimed at the Sarah persona, and let's try and make it work really well. It's always a bit scary because Microsoft Copilot, they released loads of cool agents a year and a half ago, videos, and it's never gone anywhere. Sorry, I'm just going to have to get my child, and they might be sitting on my lap for a bit. But I can hear you all. I'm just going to go off screen for a little bit.
I have not forgot, but there was also a question from Ritesh about is there a possibility to use on-device AI capability for simple tasks like translation? And she added developer Chrome.com, like there's a link to translate on device. I have no clue about this. Maybe Scott?
I can try to answer a little bit. I haven't been too involved in the AI translate module, but I do co-maintain the translation management AI module, which has a slightly different sort of focus. So maybe Jamie, you can touch on the AI translate module after, but
I've got a little baby with me, yeah.
Yeah, the translation management module it leverages the AI module, so you can use a local model if you want to, and actually, it's really kind of recommended. I haven't tested it very thoroughly, but various models apparently perform better for different languages. So things like OpenAI might perform really well for the sort of major languages, but if you've got a specific language you want to translate to, you probably have better luck with other models. And so it is useful to actually experiment between those things. The translation management tool is a sort of ecosystem on its own of modules. So this is a kind of bridge between those two. So if you are into sort of bigger translation workflows with lots of content, it can be quite useful. The module is originally from someone named Minner is his code name, and I just helped him convert it to be AI core based and added some more features in. But yeah, that could help with translation, but also, yeah, take a look at the AI translate module within the AI core module. I'm not exactly sure how it works myself, so I won't pretend to guess. Yeah. There's also documentation pages off of the AI module homepage that will link you to that.
Cool. Then Oleg just
Yeah.
wrote about yeah, there is this WordPress and something happened with Matt and the VP something. I don't know. I'm not in the WordPress, but I read a lot of this that Matt now says that the VP engine or something, how it's called, do not contribute too much, and now there is a really a war like about got this a lot of developers cannot log in anymore to WordPress and stuff, and the question was like VP engine, yeah, thanks. The question was whoop, if you have a chance, or Drupal has a chance now to take some part of the market from WordPress. Yeah, I don't know. There was also a nice, a good article from Dries who addressed this topic a bit really good, and I think a lot of people now have some feelings about it. I'm not sure if it's going this or that direction. Maybe some other wants to have talk. Maybe Scott, as you are also in the WordPress scene, maybe you can give some inputs here.
We follow it closely, obviously, because we've got a Drupal and a WordPress team. You know, it's a lot of drama. I won't sort of weigh in on opinions, but we use both sides of the fence. So you know, we want it to be settled. Really, is our sort of opinion. But I suppose there's some chance that some agencies might decide, for example, if they do both, because I think it is quite common that a lot of agencies do have multiple teams, that they may decide to lean towards something else for sort of security and stability. So I mean, maybe that's a realistic possibility. I could also see that someone new coming to, you know, build a website and they're trying to make a choice, you know, might change their decision path if they're choosing between two things, if they feel one is less stable than the other. But you know, the flip side of it is there are initiatives, you know, within Drupal. If I remember correctly, there was something on within the EU on sort of open source laws where WordPress and Drupal and Joomla and other sort of CMSs were all working together. So you know, we're not enemies or something like that. You know, I think, you know, we're all trying to make open source better, you know, as a whole, and you know, make the pie better for all of open source. Sorry, vague answer, but yeah.
I think it's a good answer, so that we should not fight each other, and also because maybe VP engine is maybe bigger than automatic or something to have this. Yeah, but I think it's another topic. It's a complex topic, and it's already quite hot, this topic. So yeah.
Yeah,
Maybe.
I just wanted to add, yeah, I think I agree with the thing about our goal isn't really to fight other open source communities. So we were thinking with Barcelona to like have a fun demo of some of the core maintainers have WordPress blogs, and we were thinking of like doing the click a button. We were thinking, could we have Figma to Drupal and these migration things there? Click a button and bring WordPress into Drupal. I'm glad we didn't do that because the real fact is that it's always been like the proprietary engines that we really want to go after. There's so much stuff there, and we want to kind of bring it back into this open source model that we know and love. So there's a lot of strong opinions about yeah, whether various people are doing the right or wrong thing. I think one thing that we do know is that the problem that they're encountering, you can see with Dries's blog post about makers versus takers, is a real thing that we feel. And I think we're finding it even in the AI module. It's a very scary thing, even on a very small scale that I've been involved with. The amount of money I've put into it, it's very scary when I release something of, is this something that ginormous agencies way bigger than me with way more funding could just take, become the AI experts, and they haven't had to spend the last year and a half innovating on it or working on it when it wasn't as good, so they can undercut us. And I think that's always been a problem with this, is that if you spend a long time working on an open source module, you release it out there, somebody can come along and offer a cheaper, maybe even better service because they haven't had to build the thing. So it's a very scary problem, and I think it's something that we should, in the Drupal community, like think a lot about, like how do we want to handle this thing? Because the reality is a lot of open source communities have not really survived that well without there being one ginormous company, you know, a lot of open source communities are now pretty much de facto owned by some Silicon Valley big tech company. And it's not really truly a community driven thing. There's very few open source things that are as community driven as even Drupal is. So yeah. I just wanted to go back to Translate, about the questions about Translate. So our strategy at the moment is we've got like, 3 approaches to Translate at the moment. So we've got the AI Translate module, which is a really simple version of it. Depending on I think the languages you have on your site or the taxonomy, when you look at the page, you can just see all the translations available and click Translate with AI. And then we have another one, which is a CK editor translation assistant. So whilst you're working on something, you can highlight some text and translate it. And then we've got what Scott's been working on with the translation management, AI translation management. I think we're going to need to put some effort into bringing things together a little bit. And one thing we're going to start doing a lot more is AI automators in core. We're going to start putting them in a lot more places. So what we have at the moment is some very simple modules like the alt text generation thing, stuff to do with, I mean, that's not ours, but there's stuff to do with AI SEO, there's stuff to do with meta tags. Again, we haven't worked on those. There's the CK editor assistants that I talked about, the content editing ones. And they have these hard-coded prompts behind the scenes. So you can customize them a bit. With the CK editor, like tone ones, they use a taxonomy, so you can add more terms. And in the description of taxonomy, you can describe to the AI how you want to do that. And we could do the same thing with the translate stuff, where in the description, you could not just translate to another language, but give it some advice on what tone you want to use or how you want to translate it, or maybe give it some context of well-translated things you've got on your site to help translate it. Sorry, I've just got a baby going to make some noises every so often. But with automators, what we're hoping to do is make it so that the simple experience of installing it is the same. You just install it, it works. But there'll be like an advanced button that you can enable or click, and you'll find automators behind it. And then when automators are behind it, you can change the prompts, you can change things, you can pull in more sources of information to double check stuff. And I think that will make it very powerful with translations to do more than just translate word for word, but get tone. One example we hear about is somebody tried to use ChatGPT to get a translate a cover letter for a job, but it was very American and it was Swedish, and it translates it into the Swedish language, but it would use American style approach to selling yourself of, I'm a rock star developer, I really care about it, I'm going to go for it, I wake up every morning really early, go get it. Whereas the Swedish approach to things is much humbler. You don't talk about yourself that much. So although it was in Swedish, like the language, it spoke not like any Swedish person would. And I think AI's translation is going to be really powerful for that. And circling back to your thing about on-premises small models being able to translate. I think so. Mistral's got a small model, and so you can try it out. I think it's going to be one of those things that when we have the evaluations module, we'll be able to really know how good these things are with stats. They do work. The question is that we just need to have larger scale testing of how bad it is to translate something on your own laptop. Don't know yet.
Cool.
Sorry, that's a long answer to your translate thing.
I do find with almost any prompt though, if you provide some examples of what a good result looks like, here's a source, here's a good example, now do the same with this thing, you get a much better result if you kind of teach it, on the spot what it should do. Prompt engineering, it's a field in its own.
One of my dreams is to integrate AI search and automators and everything a lot closer. So it means that when you do translation, you could do a search for blog posts. I don't know if you're writing a blog post. You could do a search for, you don't need to translate baby talk. Give me attention is what she's saying. So at least I know that one. What you would be good is to make it so that you can do context that is from your own site. So if we were to build a translate module and we just hard coded some examples of a good translation, that will massively make it better. What I'm intrigued by is, will it be a lot better if you can translate it with your own content, not just some like random one? And I think it will. I think there's good evidence it will. And I think Drupal will be really powerful at doing that compared to like Grammarly or these just off-the-shelf translation tools like Google Translate, because then we can like hook into your own content and do more with that. I think particularly like with SEO and meta tags, I think rather than just trying to look at your content and get AI to just guess SEO stuff, looking at previous things that worked really well on your site will become quite powerful, I think. It's very likely that SEO is going to make a good use of your specific context of your site more than just randomly what is paragraph of text and pulling out some random tags. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I know you have some things in some other sub-modules in AI, I believe. We also built one ages back before AI module existed, which is now leveraging AI module that looks at, for example, entity reference fields. You decide, you want to auto-generate sort of entity references to a taxonomy or to a node type, whatever it is, and it looks at the possible targets. It looks at the content you're working on, and then says from these possible targets, which are the best ones, which are okay ones. It makes some suggestions. You can decide whether you want to review them first, or whether you want to just auto accept the best results sort of thing. And that type of approach, just here's the content, here's some good suggestions. Using your own content just makes such better results. And we've got that in production with some really big think tanks, and I'll talk about that a bit more in my talk. But think tanks really care about accuracy. Because they're quoted and cited, by the media, by governments, all the time. So, they're really held to account. And so, they're extra careful, basically. And, accuracy is really important. And I think that kind of, prompt working really makes a big difference. Yeah.
There was a question about Augmenter. We did talk to the Augmenter team a bit at the beginning. I don't know how active the Augmenter module specifically is. Martin, who works at Acquia, he's been heavily involved in all the Starshot stuff, is one of the maintainers of Augmenter, and he has been mostly focusing on the event recipe because he's track lead for the event recipe in Starshot. But he's got this grand plan for improving automators to be something that is, at the moment, automators are mostly something you put on a field and you make it custom each time. So we want automators to be more reusable, which they are becoming. We've already got them in the image alt text, and we're about to bring them to the CK editor assistants. But what he really wants to do, and one thing that was important with augmenters, is have buttons where the end user could trigger it. Now, I've actually found this controversy in buttons. There's a lot of people who have a strong opinion against buttons. I didn't realize that UX people were they had a strong opinion that you shouldn't ever have buttons. But I don't know. I sometimes like them. Augmenter use them a lot. And so we have this idea of expanding automators so that rather than they fire just when you click save, that they can fire on for other reasons, such as being triggered by the end user. And he has this grand plan for it. We hope to look into implementing that soon. That might then do some of what was in Augmenter. But if you were talking about interpolator workflows of AI, that is, that's now updated to the automators submodule in AI. So hopefully that answers your question. And yeah, I think we're about to get to time for Scott's. There aren't any more questions. So Nico, did you want to ask me anything first before I drop off as well? I mean, I'll be around, but.
Yep, everything good. So we have nearly on point, so just 5 minutes. There was the question from Kristen, so if it's monthly or how often we have this meetup. So yeah, we try to have it monthly. We said before we want to have it once per quarter, but now I think it would be nice to have it every month. It's not too much work, but we can maybe get together some people, so have a backlog of new sessions. So if you want to send me something or want to present something, just ping me at Slack. Then it's there. Maybe it will be recorded. 2 of us are recording it because the software is not currently cannot record it. But let's see if we managed it with OBS. Some of us. that we can record it. So, and I would say now the first question what I have for Scott is, are you? Yep.
Sorry, just one question about it. So just to reply to that question about Chinese. So there's this fantastic, I'll post it on the AI chat, fantastic PDF that I've been looking through. It's like a 200-page presentation called The State of AI by a consultancy firm that looks only at AI stuff. And they've been doing it since 2016, I think. Really, really good. And they went through like everything that's happened in AI in 2024 so far. And one of the things that they've said is there's quite a lot of these Chinese models that are doing pretty well despite the sanctions. And obviously, they're going to be very good at the Chinese translation. So that's something to look at. I can't remember the name of them or where you find exactly these particular leaderboards. I think they're on Hugging Face. So post it on #AI, and I can see if I can get that PDF linked to somewhere. Yeah. Okay. Speak to you soon.
Scott, yeah, I have one question for you. There is, do you use JetBrains, PHP Storm, or anything?
I don't. Oh, JetBrains, yeah, I do.
If you want,
PHP
I can
Storm,
provide you a license for any product for 1 year. So as a small thank you, if you want, I can pass it over.
Thanks.
If not, I will just give it randomly to someone if you want. So
I think you can give it on because they give me a license anyways already.
Okay, then I would go
because
first.
I maintain enough open source. I think you kind of just show them a bunch of links and then they give you a license every year. So
okay.
Yeah.
So then I would ask
but thank you.
somebody in the watching this, if you want to one of the license, just write I love PHP, and the first one will get it. And now we go on with your presentation, Scott. It's about AI search. It's a deep dive into AI search module. And yeah, the show is yours. You have already the permission. I think you can somewhere on the bottom share a screen. Perfect. Thank you.
That should work. Good. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I'm going to talk about the AI search submodule of the AI core. So I'm Scott Euser. I'm the Director of Web Development at Soapbox. It's an organization which builds websites for think tanks, research organizations. I'm explaining that because it's useful for a bit of context as to the kind of sites we build and the kind of things that I'll talk about in this. We do sites that have a lot of content, sometimes 10,000 pieces of content, sometimes 100,000 pieces of content. And so, building things that scale, including for AI, are particularly interesting for me. And search is obviously important. When a client has lots of content, they need to be able to find it, and that's the sort of challenge. So I'm also very involved in the Drupal community as well. I maintain quite a number of modules and contribute to core when I can as well. You can find me at drupal.org, Scott_Euser. So what I'm going to try to get through today is helping conceptualize what AI search is and the kind of concepts that you need to understand in order to be able to use it well. It's providing you a set of tools, but the use case that you might have could differ very vastly from the things that, like Jamie was talking about, like feeding information into your agents and so on, is very different than an end user of your website wanting to find relevant content. So I'll give a bunch of examples of what you can do with it, and just to get sort of ideas rolling. And I will do a demo as well. So it will be a live demo. So if it doesn't work out, sorry in advance. I'll otherwise post a recording afterwards. But I have tried it a couple times, so fingers crossed. So yeah, how to set it up and make it work well. That's the demo bit. How to make it useful in sites today, and then I'd like to just open up for questions and discussion. I'm learning this as well. I don't pretend to be an expert in all this. I've obviously had to learn enough to be able to build a lot of it. In the AI search module, there's been a number of us who have been contributing to it. I used to co-maintain with Kevin from Valier the OpenAI embeddings module, but it wasn't the foundation for the AI search. The foundation was the Search API AI module. And that SEO guy, that's Michel, I think is how you pronounce his name, did a lot of the initial porting. It's evolved a lot over the last months to make it sort of more robust, stable, flexible, integrated with views and all sorts of things. But yeah, it can continue to use, more contributions to take it forward. So without further ado, I want to talk a bit about vector databases first. So vector databases, vectors are not a Drupal concept, it's a mathematical concept. It's trying to record distance and sort of measure information to sort of define different concepts. So the point is you want to try to capture the semantic meaning of the things that you're indexing. So I'm going to be comparing this a lot to a database search that you have, the Search API database module, the Search API Solr module, the sort of traditional indexing of content. In this case, we're indexing vectors. So that's a sort of semantic representation of the meaning of the content. So we're trying to capture as much as possible the concepts that your content has. So if you're looking at this sort of diagram here, you can see that dog, cat, wolf, they're all kind of in the same realm. Banana, apple, fruits, they're in a sort of different realm. But there are many sort of things, like you can have the sentiment of something, the size of it, the height, the sort of textures. There's all sorts of attributes for everything. In this case, it's the physical object that it is, and there's things that are close by. So when something's close by, it means that when you search for something, if you search for a dog, if it can't quite find dogs in your content, cat's close by to that. But it also takes the entire sort of concept of your content. So if you put a lot of content together and you vectorize it, you have sort of many dimensions. So you can imagine that you have this sort of chunk of content that's pointing at many things. Maybe it's pointing at bananas and apples, and maybe it's also pointing at wolves and dogs, and maybe it's also pointing at happiness and sadness, and maybe it's also pointing at something else, and it's all sort of about the strength that it's pointing to those things, and that provides this representation of your content. And then you take the content from the user, whether that's a question or whether that's a piece of content in your site, and you're trying to find similar pieces of content, find related content, whatever it is. You do the same process, you convert it to these vectors, and then it's just math that I don't pretend to understand. That basically calculates the distance between these things. So there's a number of different mathematical ways to do it. The kind of default one that most people tend to use, and from what I can read tends to be the sort of recommended if you're not sure, is a cosine. So you might remember that from back in high school math days, I'm guessing. So we're trying to vectorize the content, but content can be very long. So what we do compared to, let's say, a Search API database or Solr, instead of having one thing in the database, we break up the piece of content into many things so that you can have a more accurate representation of that content in sort of many forms. So you can have many sort of sets of these vectors for a long piece of content. So the Search API, the AI search module allows you to define how big those chunks are and things like that. I'll get into a bit more detail when we're configuring about sort of pros and cons around different ways. And then, yeah, you do the same to the user query to try to find the closest things. So some of you may have read Steve Krug. He's a sort of famous UX strategist, all about sort of web usability. This is a quote that's not from him. It says, users don't know what they want, they can't articulate it, they don't know what's possible, and they don't know the terms to use for things. So somebody's coming to search your site, they don't know the terminology you use. You may use technical terms, or it could be that they're new to the topic, and they will likely fail to find what they want using a traditional database, because it's not capturing the meaning of the words they're using. It's or of the words you're using in your content. It's just recording, those words, and there are modules to get around it, like synonyms and things like that help. Other sort of concepts like Porter stemmer, so removing like the ing and the s and the eds and the sort of extensions of words to kind of make words more similar, but ultimately you get much sort of worse results. So I asked ChatGPT for a quote that kind of helped articulate this concept, and it told me that this was a quote from Steve Crook. I tried to verify that. It wasn't the quote from him. And when I questioned ChatGPT, it confirmed that it made it up. So it's just a kind of, example. If you don't provide the information to the LLM, to the large language model, for it to find the answer, it's going to give you a much less accurate answer. So the whole concept behind this is we're trying to find nearby content, and then we can use a concept called RAG, which is called Retrieval Augmented Generation, to basically take that nearby content and then ask the user's question, or question it with our content or our made up question, whatever it is. So this is sort of IBM's simplified version of the process. So we're taking a query. So let's just imagine that the user's saying, I want to know all about how to eat bananas. And then you do an information retrieval. So you find all the articles that are about bananas. And then you combine those answers and you say, well, here's 3 articles about bananas. These are the most relevant ones. Here's the user's question. Using the content above, answer the question. If you don't find the answer in there, don't answer it. Say you don't know the answer, don't make it up. That kind of sort of prompt gives you a really good response, because you're telling it, use only what you find. The answer's got to be in here. If the answer's not in here, tell the user it's not in there. That sort of thing. And it works really, really well to get a much more accurate answer. So that's called Retrieval Augmented Generation, RAG, and that's sort of what this module facilitates. It doesn't do it itself, the RAG bit. It does the indexing bit. It does the finding of the content, making sure you're getting, the most relevant results. And then the last sort of step of, taking those results and asking the question is a fairly straightforward one, which I'll demo as well today. So a few practical applications. Finding more relevant search results. So that's the sort of quite practical thing you could do now on your website. What I'm looking at here is things that, without much change to your existing website, you can just make your own website better. Better on-page related content. So if you vectorize the content of, let's say, your publication or article, and then you compare it in the vector database, you'll find much more relevant results, because they'll be very, very close to the thing you're currently looking at. Then automated featuring content on a topic. So you might want to have some sort of block that, automatically finds, things on a topic page you've created. You might want to have promotions or call to actions that are automatically loaded. Or you might feed the user perhaps some personalization. So maybe you've got a logged in area in your site, and the user's interested in particular topics. And so you could do some personalization with it, or even based on their browsing habits rather than sort of topics of interest. So, lots of kind of interesting things you could do now without much effort. I'll talk a little bit more about the sort of bigger picture, stuff that Jamie's been mentioning a bit. But I just want to get into a bit of a demo, if I can. There we go. So on the AI module, just to say, on the homepage, you got the documentation page here. Within the documentation page, we have a section on AI search. The other thing you need is a vector database. So this is the place you actually store it. So the sort of equivalent of that is, let's say you're using Search API Solr. Pinecone or Milvus would be the equivalent of like OpenSolr or Apache Solr hosted, or one of the other Solr providers. So you need the AI search module to basically handle the indexing, leverage Search API to do that. So I'm just going to get started with the Pinecone one. So just to note on this one, Milvus has it's a more open source one, so you can actually install it locally within DDEV. You don't need to then have it stored in some cloud version, but I'm just going to show the cloud version because I think it's maybe one of the simpler ways to set it up with Pinecone. Milvus also has a cloud sort of companion version, which is called Zillis Cloud, and the Milvus provider supports that as well. And both of them, both Pinecone and Zillis, have a free version, which are quite comparable. So feel free to try either of them. So this is the sort of interface in Pinecone. I've got a place to add my API keys, and in the Drupal configuration, we similarly have a place to configure our API keys so that we can match it up, and it's all using the key module in Drupal. So I'm going to create a database. So I've got a couple indexes in there already. I'm just going to, that's from other tests. So I'm just going to make one called Umami because I'm using the Umami site to kind of demo this. It's got this auto configuration to configure by model. So here's where we first get into the first sort of concepts. So we're talking about the dimensions of a vector. So whether something is about animals or about color, size, all these things. A large language model generates that vector, and then you store it in something like Pinecone. So when you're generating that vector can have lots and lots of attributes. So a small model would have, for example, in this case, this is OpenAI's logo, using them to generate a 1,536 dimensions. So that's one, it's like tagging your piece of content 1,536 times, but actually it's much more than that because it's also got the sort of distance from something. Like a cat is not that far from a dog if you compare it to a banana, right? So so it's much more than just the sort of tagging something, 1,500 times in that sense. I'm going to pick that because it's slightly smaller. The price difference isn't really huge for it. You can also generate embeddings with local models, and that's available if you look in the documentation for some of the providers within Ollama offer it. So you can set that up like that, but I'm just going to use an OpenAI one for simplicity. So this is probably what most people are going to try out when they're first trying. So I'm going to create this index. That should take a second. So I've got no records in it. And I will now set up a search API server. So these are just me playing around. I won't get into the Milvus one, but I will use the database one because I want to show the combination of using a database index and Pinecone in a second. So let's just call this Pinecone Umami. Name doesn't matter at all. You can really call it whatever you want. And I'll choose the same model that I chose in Pinecone here. So if you remember, I chose that 1536 dimensions, the small. I'm choosing the same there. We do have an issue open to just automatically choose that for you. There's been a lot of work to try to just automate, validate things and make it easier, but it's down to this as the sort of decisions you need to make. This bit about tokenizing is about counting how much information you send at once to, for example, OpenAI or whatever model you're using. So it's about counting it. To be honest, it doesn't make a huge difference if you get it wrong. I haven't really hit quite so many errors, but if you are doing a lot of content, you might hit errors then because you might get to a point where it's slightly miscalculated and it's, for example, sent too much data to OpenAI and they've rejected the call saying, oh, you're allowed to send this many tokens, but you've sent too many. So better to just sort of get it right. I'll choose the Pinecone database there, and it lets me select from the ones I had created here. So I had my 3 indexes. I've got my new Umami one, and I'm going to select Umami. I can call my namespace whatever I want. So namespace basically allows me to separate into multiple indexes. So maybe I'm indexing now recipes from Umami, but I could also index, back to Dave's example, I could index my configuration, for example, something like that, So namespace, I'm just going to call it Umami for now, Umami recipes, let's say. And I'm just going to leave the similarity as defaults. So we've tried to set sensible defaults for everything. So generally, you don't need to touch the advanced stuff, but it is there. So if you are using some sort of local model where it has some unknown number of dimensions, you can do that yourself. Probably ignore that. Embedding strategy. So this is about how we break up the content into chunks. And I'm going to get into a little bit more detail in the next page. But basically, if you got a really long piece of content, if you send it all at once, let's say it's, I don't know, in a A4 equivalent, 50 pages. If you send 50 pages of content to generate a vector from, that vector is going to be quite inaccurate. So even though it's got 1,500 dimensions or 3,000 dimensions or whatever it is, depending on the model you chose, you're still going to lose a lot of the meaning behind the words, because you may have way more words, way more meaning, and way more sort of topics embedded within that that particular long article touches on. And so you want to break it up into chunks so that you get more accurate vector representations of each chunk. But this gets slightly more complicated though. If you do that, and if you break a long, let's say 50-page article into chunks, if you miss things like what is this article about as a whole, so maybe the introduction, the conclusion, an abstract, things like that, if you miss those key bits of information, then you're embedding a chunk of content that may have gone off on a tangent within the article, and that tangent may not actually be relevant to what the user is actually after. So that's why we have this concept here of contextual content. So for every chunk of content, you've got your big chunk of content that you're breaking up into smaller chunks. And for each one, we want to just sort of add in, oh, by the way, here's the title of the article again, here's the summary of it, here's the abstract, that sort of information, so that every chunk has that information and a bit of the chunk. Then the next chunk has that information again and a bit of the content, and so on. And so maybe a really long article gets broken up into 10, 15, 20 chunks, but always has that contextual content in there, so that when the vector is generated, it contains the overall concept of what the article is after still and doesn't miss that. So basically, this is allowing you to have sort of more fine-grained controls over how that works. I'm just going to leave them all as the defaults and save this. And it should tell you that you're able to reach Pinecone or Zillis or Milvis or whatever it is, and it's going to tell you some basic stats on it. Then we need to, just like with Search API, we need to create our index within that. So I'm going to call this Mommy Pinecone again, and I want to index content. I'm going to index everything, and just to make it quicker, because it is going to take a little bit of time to generate, I'm just going to index the English ones for now. And I'm going to pick the Pinecone server, and the rest of the settings I'm just going to leave the same. We can make the batch size a bit smaller, because it does take a bit longer to generate the embeddings than you would when you would be indexing in a database or indexing into Solr. So it is a bit a longer process. So this will be a familiar interface. So nothing's sort of changed in Search API there. I think they have some plans, if I understood right, to kind of update this to sort of be more Drupal-y, but I will just add some content for now. So I'm adding the rendered HTML because I want to include the body content. The reason I'm choosing the search index view mode is because it automatically excludes the header and footer of the content of the page. So you just get the sort of the body of the node and the any fields and so on. And I want it to be as an anonymous user, so I make sure that nothing is getting leaked. So I'm adding that field. I can just show what that looks like here. So I've got that field like you're used to, and I'm going to add some other fields, and then I'm going to start explaining a little bit what this means. So I'm just going to add, let's see, content type, and maybe authored on, and anything else useful. Publish status. Okay, so you get your fields as you're used to, and you have one additional row here that's not available in Solr or database. That's the indexing option. So what this is deciding, do I want that content to be that chunk, which is broken up and separated into chunks, or do I want it to be that contextual content, that bit that's put every single time onto each embedding? So I'll put the content type as contextual content. I'll show you the result of this in a second. Let me just add the title as well. So the contextual content is basically I'm going to pull through this content and add it into my vector embedding so that my vector keeps this as context. The filterable attributes are something that get attached into the vector embedding inside Pinecone. I'm going to show you once it starts indexing what that means, but it's the equivalent of allowing you to do views filters or views exposed filters on the content. It has limited mileage, and so I'll get into sort of alternatives to be able to do really powerful filtering, because the filtering supported by tools like Pinecone and Mildless and Zillus is much more basic than what you'd be used to in configuring filters and views. But the filterable attributes aren't part of the vector. They don't have that semantic meaning. They're used for filtering the content and not for figuring out the meaning of the content. So that's why it's useful to, for instance, have the date something was authored on, the published status, that kind of thing. So this is all explained here. So we've tried to add, as much sort of descriptions and inline context as possible so that you can go through on your own, give it a read, because these are they're important concepts in order to get the right content indexed. And if you don't get the right content sort of indexed in each chunk, you'll have much worse results. And if you don't have good results, then you'll be disappointed by your AI tools. So getting this right is quite important. So we've added some tools to make it a bit easier to see what the results will be. I'm just going to save the changes first. So if I look for content, so I know that there's some oatmeal related content in Umami. So I'm going to pull that up, and it now shows me some details that have been added for each chunk. So it's making 1536 dimensions. That was the amount I selected. It's going to set this as a filterable attribute, set that as a filterable attribute. But the bit I care about really is looking at the content. So it's taking this chunk of content from the article and creating a chunk there. And now I've hit the end of the tokens for my chunk. Token is it's roughly 4 characters. That's a very simplified way of saying it, but it's not characters. It's not words. It's something in between, effectively. So it's added my content type as context, but if I had, let's say, an abstract or a summary, that would be really useful. It added the title as context. So that's the kind of repeating thing. If I look at the next chunk, I again have the title, the content type, and so on, but it's the next sort of chunk of content. So this is all done by what we call an embedding strategy. There are possibilities to make more advanced ones. So you can see, for example, it's broken here at a bracket that makes very little difference in terms of the vectorization. The large language model is good at ignoring things and kind of figuring things out. But one day we could have it that it nicely breaks at headings or something if it could. It's a bit tricky when you try to deal with multiple languages and covering that. But now we have our chunked content, so we can see what it looks like. We could test out a few different ones, and we can make tweaks here until we're happy with it. So this isn't indexed yet. Nothing's in Pinecone. Nothing's sort of there. This is really just for testing what's going to get chunked. So yeah, that's that step. And in processors, so this is again an interface you'd be used to. You don't really need to do anything here. Even the content access by default, we're checking the access method on the entity. So if you don't have access to the content, when it gets returned, it's not returned to you. It gets skipped. So by default, that's already there, unless you specifically say that the vector database should skip or should bypass access controls. So yeah, so you'll only get the content that you as a user have access to by default. So I've got my database here, and I'm going to just start it indexing. While it's doing that, because it's going to take a bit, maybe I'll wait a second on this screen so you can see how long it takes to do the first 5. I think it'll be maybe 30 seconds or so. And then we can pop over to Pinecone and see what's showing up there and talk about that for a second. So there we go, first 5 showing up. And if we look in Pinecone, we can see the vectors coming in. So if I take a look at this. So that's what a vector looks like. So that's 1,536 sort of dimensions that are, showing the sort of the conceptual meaning of this, the semantic meaning of this piece of content. It's putting the content in there so you can see what it's kind of raw grabbed, and it's also got these filterable attributes. So we've got our status one that we had put there, and we've got a created field that we put there, but we also automatically need to add certain bits that are just contextual things that we need in the AI search module, which is, for example, the piece of content that's being indexed and the chunk. So this is the piece of content plus a sort of number. And we know which index ID and which server it belongs to. So there are many chunks per piece of content. That's a sort of big difference from Search API database or Search API Solr. You're going to get lots of content rather than just the exact number of like nodes or whatever it is you're indexing. So let's see, did we finish? Yeah, we finished. So one way you can sort of test out querying, it's a bit of a sort of basic interface for now, and can always use some improvements, but a quick way to do it is in this API Explorer. So this API Explorer is a submodule. You have to enable it, and then you get all these sort of ways to explore the sort of different features of the AI module. I'll be honest, the only one I've actually tried is this one, because I'm sort of squirreled away in my little corner of the AI module in AI search, but this is a useful tool to check. So I could check, tell me some good breakfast recipes, and I can see what it pulls up. So I'm taking our umami pinecone, and let's just run that and see what shows up. So I've got an oatmeal recipe, because that's a sort of good breakfast one. This one's got things about eggs in it, so that's probably why it thinks it's a good sort of breakfast one. Chocolate brownies, love to have that for breakfast. Yeah, so you can see basically its sort of approach to get results. You can ask anything. It doesn't need to be sort of keywords. But where I find it gets a lot more interesting is when you start using it in views. So I'm going to create a view. And I'll grab our umami pinecone index. Let's just call it pinecone demo. We'll create a page. And I'm going to render, let's say, as cards, our results. Maybe we'll make it a grid. And we need to add a full text search to it. So that's the same thing you would do if you were using a database or Solr Search API index. I want to make sure the users can search as well. And sort of the only kind of difference that I would say is by default, it's 128 character limit on a full text search. And that's because that's more or less how the database and Solr ones work, is you want to enter a couple keywords, but you don't want to enter a sentence. But the difference here is you can enter whatever you want. It's fine if you enter one keyword, two keywords, you'll get results. But if you want to ask it as a question instead, that's also fine. So I would recommend just making a higher limit there. And you can add, filters as well if you want, using the sort of bits we had, like the content type or published status, and so on. But like I said, that'll get you kind of limited mileage. Not everything will work, so you do need to sort of test it out and see if it is actually filtering. I'll show you the method that I'm confident does always work after, but yeah. So if I view this demo, so I could do a search for example, oatmeal, and I get oatmeal as the first result, but I can also search for things that don't have any words in there, so that have more contextual meaning. So I could do, I don't know, vegan recipes, tips for baking better. Shopping for food tips, stuff like that. So you get sort of really good results regardless of what you search for. You don't have to know about this content at all. If anybody has any suggestions for things to that they want me to search for, feel free to ask that as well. I'm happy to kind of, give other things a try. Where this becomes more interesting again is when you go back into configuration, and if you have a database index, so I've indexed the same content. I think in this case I've got both languages, but it doesn't matter. It can combine the two together. So the big way to combine it, so this is, I'm not going to show the database stuff because that's not part of this module, but I've set it up. And the only sort of new thing that you'll see is there's this boost database by AI search. And when I get that, then I can say combine with the Pinecone one. I can set a minimum relevance score. So for every one of these fields, there's a lot of details sort of there as description to try to explain what it is, what's the purpose, how it works, and then there's also the documentation. But basically here, you get a score between 0 and 1. That's what the Pinecone is going to return, or Zillis, or Milvis, or any other sort of vector database will return. So it's going to return a score. I'm going to stick with a sort of lower score, but if you really want, to be specific, if your users kind of know what's on your site, and you only want to return really relevant results, you can set that to higher. You can play with it in the API Explorer, because the API the AI Explorer module was giving you the sort of scores in there, so you could see what the scores were and kind of try to gauge what you think would be a reasonable amount. What we're doing here is we're returning results from the vector database, and then we're changing the sort order of the database search. So the traditional database search, we're changing the sort order of that to basically say, first return these results, and then return the rest of the results by score. So if you've got 10,000 pieces of content, this is still just going to prepend 10 results maximum. If it finds 10 relevant results, it'll prepend that and make those the top. Arguably, that's fine, because I think you probably all heard the argument. If you don't find it on the first page of Google results, does it exist, sort of thing. Vivek, you had a question about, do the fields have to be the same for both the indices? No, they don't actually. All we care about is that there's an overlap in ID. And even still, it even doesn't really make a difference. It just means that it's not going to help you if you've indexed two different things. So if you indexed recipes in one and articles in another, it's going to suggest to boost some recipes, but it just will have no effect because those recipes won't be in the other database. So they have to exist in both. But it could be that your vector database index is just a subset of your full database index, and that's fine. That makes no problem there. So I can save this boost, and then if I go to, actually, I think it would be useful for me to turn off the boost for a second, just to show you what the database search returns if I search for these kind of pieces of content. So if I search for breakfast tips, I get no results. If I search for baking tips, okay, I did get one that has baking and tips in it. Yeah, no results basically. So a lot of times you get no results in a traditional search. So the boost by AI search, if I turn that back on, and there, baking tips. You can see that you get results again. So basically combining the two together, yet I'm using the database as the source. The big benefit there is that I can then filter and combine, to get only chocolate results from how I make cake, or only, I don't know, ones with tagged as egg or something in there. So you can combine then the two searches to get all the benefits that you'd expect from views, with all the filters working, all the sort of nice things that you have with views, and all the sort of AI search is doing is then boosting your content, so you get much more relevant results, and kind of do away with complaints of my content isn't being found, which it's just normal that when you're basing things by keyword and scoring, if someone doesn't know your content of your site, they're not going to find anything, or they'll get lucky and they'll find something, but a lot of times they won't. And then obviously the benefit here is that someone can also type things as a question, because you can capture the semantic meaning of that question, compare it to the vector database, and find good results. Now you can take it a bit further. This isn't part of the module, but just to give an example of, so that this is all vector database. The other thing that I described was retrieval augmented generation. So that's the RAG concept. That's where you take the results and then you pass that to ChatGPT or whatever, to the large language model, to ask that question with those contents. So you say, here's these 3 pieces of content, or 5 or 10 or whatever. If you make it too much, it starts to lose its accuracy. So I would say something like 3 to 5, depending on the length of your articles. You say, here are these pieces of content, here's the user's question, answer it. If the answer's in there, if the answer's not in there, don't answer it, that kind of thing. And, tweak your prompts and figure out what works best for your content. But let me go back to that database one. So I'll just add an area header that I created that basically just takes the keywords from that the user searched for. So if I now do that, then I get an answer of how to make cake, or I don't have an answer for that. Didn't get relevant enough results. And obviously you can do more things like this. Like you can use from the AI module, it's got a streaming response that comes from, for example, OpenAI and a number of other providers, and that'll give you the effect of it typing as it comes up with the answer, which makes it feel much faster. Because as you notice, there's a bit of a delay when you do it in this sort of raw way, where you just sort of ask the question, give the answer. So if you're implementing this, you probably want to have something where it's kind of streaming the answer back, so it feels more immediate, that you don't have to kind of wait for it, and it kind of lets you start browsing the content straight away. But yeah, that's just one example of how you can use RAG, and you get a much more accurate answer because it's using the content from the articles it found related. Actually, look at that. This is because I have tagged with egg. Oops. There you go. That's a much better brownie recipe. But yeah, the combination of the two works really, really well. It's quite interesting. Let me just pop back to presentation. Just to kind of conclude on it, it's vastly better at relevance. It's working fine with more natural language, not just keyword search. So you can, search with phrases, questions, whatever you'd like. It's okay at filtering, but like I said, limited mileage. So really combine it with a database-driven one, and you'll get much better results. It's not great at comparing across information. So you see all these questions I'm asking are related to things that can get answered by 1, 2, 3 articles. But let's say you have 10,000 articles and you ask a question like, how did baking trends change over the last 10 years? It's not going to be able to answer that unless you've got an article that's kind of summarizing that kind of thing. For that, there are other concepts like knowledge graphs and things like that that you could read on, where it tries to, as far as I understand it, I've not tried this, and there might be people here who know about it better, who could speak on it, but as far as I understand it, you kind of figure out the specific question, summarize all the content that's related to that, then take those summaries and then ask the question against those summaries so that you've kind of covered across your content. But it's much more complicated and it's not supported by the AI search module. So there's, it'll answer a lot of your questions. It'll do a lot better, but it's not solving all the things yet. You can do those things, but those are really hard to make a sort of one size fits all type approach. You almost need to look at your use case, take your own knowledge and think, okay, what would be the information I need to retrieve from my site or from external sources or whatever it is in order to answer this question, and then work with the tools provided either by AI module or other modules to be able to put that into code. Exact match is the other kind of warning. So it's not, as you saw, recording the words in the vector. The vector is a representation of the concepts and as close as something gets to a concept. But if somebody comes and searches, let's say they're the author of a report and they type in the name of the report, it is very possible that that'll be one of the top results, because it's very likely that the report is usefully named and actually represents the sort of content in there, and therefore then the results would probably be that same result. But it's different than actually having an exact match search. So there is a functionality in the AI search module where it then and this only works in the Solr version, so not in the database version, because the Solr is the one that kind of supports exact match phrasal searches combined with non-exact match, where you can say I want it to then give me less results or no results from the AI search if somebody uses quotes, so that you get the exact match coming back for if somebody's looking for a specific phrase. Combining with Solr gives you sort of opportunity to get around that particular limitation. I mentioned sort of going beyond. So obviously this, I'm looking at it from very much a sort of website with lots of content perspective and what could be done, there. But it can do a lot more things. You can combine it with, for example, there's an AI assistant submodule, which is it's got a RAG AI action in there, which basically then queries your vector database, finds content and helps answer the question within that. More actions could be set up so that, for example, the agent stuff that Jamie was talking about could come into play. So maybe it takes that content and makes a decision to carry out some action, like maybe you indexed Drupal documentation for views, and then based on that, it found the relevant documentation page, and that suggested that it needs to create an exposed filter, and then the AI could then know, okay, I need to now use the exposed filter agent to create that. So yeah, it can do a lot more things than just sort of content related things, but this is the sort of foundation that can allow you to kind of build off of. That's the end of what I wanted to talk through. Really interested to hear thoughts, questions, and yeah, thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. It was really exciting to see how easy it also is to set it up if you know how it's done. One question would be for me, what is the database or the vector database you would use, or what do you have the best experience, and maybe also what is not so about costs also, because I think Pinecone is like a hosted thingy, but I'm not sure. Maybe you can give us here some insights.
I've only tried Pinecone, Zillus, and Milvus, so I know there's some support. I think it was Josh, you were saying from Numico, were saying that you were working on the Postgres one maybe. TypeSense is another option which has it. Weaviate. There's really lots of sort of different storage engines. Personally, I didn't notice any difference between them in terms of the performance of it. I found that how I configured the chunking, what I added to each chunk in terms of contextual content, the size of the dimensions, that kind of thing, I found more important to get good results, and not where it was stored. They all seem to be pretty comparable. The free plans seem fine, as far as I can tell. I haven't hit a case where I've needed to go beyond the free plan. I'm sure that will come though when things get sort of more heavily used in production. And working locally, the Milvus one in the submodule for the Milvus provider, there's a sample ddev docker compose with the instructions in the documentation to just spin that up. So that's the best way to kind of for free work on it. Yeah. So I don't particularly have a strong recommendation of which one to use. Try them, see if you can come up with a reason for one or the other yourselves. But yeah. Also a shout out to Vivek, who did a lot of the starter code for the Pinecone integration into the AI module as well. By the way.
Jim, you want to say something about the MariaDB?
Yeah. So so Pinecone and last year it was only really Pinecone that did this, especially with OpenAI's dimension size. I just want to emphasize as well that when you're setting this up, dimension size is super important to get right when you're picking the embedding that you're going to use. But almost everyone is trying to do it now. So Quadrant we don't support, but yet. But one of our team, is it Michelle? Have I been pronouncing it incorrectly then? Scott? What?
I'm not sure either. Yeah.
Anyway, he's been working a lot with Quadrant, and Quadrant's quality of filtering and grouping apparently is a lot better than Pinecone and Milvus at the moment. So maybe we'll try and do that one. But also Elasticsearch, one of the people that have helped the Aalto University, they've been working with us to get Microsoft's Azure platform as a provider. They've been using Elasticsearch and their vector functionality, and that's really cool because then you can do a lot of hybrid search like what Scott showed. But now you're doing Elasticsearch, so obviously it's very good at doing
the filtering
and searching. But then apparently MariaDB's vector database is now in preview, and they say that they've got really good presentations. I want to echo what Scott said about the difference between them. Is you can kind of pick whatever you like. The core ability to search is about the embedding model you use, not about the database, because the concept of vector databases and the cosine similarity way of doing the search is an algorithm that's been around for decades. There's no innovation on that. You're not going to get some better engine at searching. So there's going to be minor differences in performance, and then there's like features and which you find easier to use, but it won't make better results just because you use a better database at all. But yeah, I just also wanted to echo how cool this is. Like, it's definitely the case that I've got like my head in the clouds and I'm really thinking about the future, and Scott's more thinking about like things are actually practical directly to clients right away. And I'm thinking about how Drupal and AI is going to take over the entire world in 2 or 3 years. And the thing that is really cool about this, yeah, and the thing that's really cool about this is like it is something that you can probably just set up on almost any Drupal site that exists right now that does any search, and it will probably be just better. It is theoretically possible that you have a Drupal site where you put a lot of effort into your search, your Solr and your Elastic, you put loads of energy into like thinking of synonyms and weightings, but the vast majority of Drupal sites turn on Search API, index things, turn on Solr and do nothing. And then you get a lot of complaints that the search is not very good. A lot of Drupal sites really have terrible search and everyone uses Google, as Scott said. And so if your search is already pretty bad, you can install this and it will probably just be better. Just better, without any thought, without any real thinking about this embedding strategy that you go for. If you do think about the embedding strategy, it'll be even better. So I think it's quite cool. It's definitely something that, well, maybe one day we'll see in Starshot, as it does feel like out of the box. It just makes things better when you bring the two together. Did you do any performance? Did there any performance stuff to do with using Search API with a vector database versus traditional relational database? Do you have any performance changes when you boost it with a vector versus not, Scott?
I mean, in terms of performance, in terms of speed, it's worse,
Yeah.
of course, because you have to do these external queries. It does take longer to get a result. But in terms of performance of results, I mean, statistically, I haven't done huge numbers, but I've done a lot of test cases, to be able to show clients how it works. And the vast majority of searches that I could come up with and that clients could come up with, it does better. Yeah.
And when you say speed, could you give us like rough orders of magnitude? So if something takes 1 second, how much longer it's going to take with the vector database boosted on it?
So what I showed there was basically the maximum lag you'll get in addition to, even for 10,000 or 100,000 pieces of content, because basically all it's doing is, when you're doing this combined search, at least you're grabbing, 10 or whatever pieces of content, and whether you're prepending that to 100,000 pieces of content or 10,000, it's not really making a difference. Because it's still the database or Solr that's doing the majority of the work for the bulk of the content. So there's the additional couple seconds depending on the on the tool you use. So if you're using OpenAI or if you're using something locally or something else, different models have different speeds for that. So you've got to generate the embedding from what the user asked, and then you have to query the vector database, get the results, and then it just prepends it to the to the Solr database results. Sorry, it's not a very mathematical answer, but yeah.
You're thinking like 1 or 2 seconds, and I think it is the case that a lot of these smaller models, instead of using OpenAI, you could use like a self-hosted one. That'll be a lot quicker. I'm generally finding the smaller ones are a lot faster than even OpenAI. Although OpenAI has like OpenAI 4.0 Mini, which is a lot faster. So yeah.
Scott, maybe you can jump into the comment from Josh quickly.
Oh yeah. Thanks very much, Josh. Yeah, we've been chatting a bit on Slack. Really excited to hear. I've heard about performance being a bit heavier on Postgres, so I'm curious to hear how things go with that as well. Yeah, really looking forward to playing around with it.
So Josh is talking about that he's working on the Postgres integration, so big vector with the database, and has a lot of progress here. It's looking good, so let's see how this comes out.
Yeah, we're really happy. We recently just announced that we were working with OpenSocial and their Gaia AI tool, and they've been using Milvus for that. But one of their team is super into Postgres for like everything. So I'm sure he'll be really excited by that. When we did our Search API AI module a long time ago, it was Pinecone. And then when Marcus took it over, we actually did move to Postgres to do everything, because then you could do this blended thing very easily. So I do wonder if Postgres will get good. We'll see.
Yeah, MariaDB would be
Wow,
great.
that's so interesting that you've spent
default.
hours speaking Solr, and this beats it hands down. It's so cool.
Yeah, the MariaDB would be really great if it performs well. Yeah, just being DDev's default and the default that probably most sites are using, I guess, would just break down some barriers of entry for it.
Yeah, well, it's out now, so it'll be interesting to see. Take a look at it. It wasn't out before, but it's actually, the preview is now out. So you could always download it. It's going to be in the core of MariaDB 11.7. So a lot of people don't. Oh wait, no, it's even in 11.6. Yeah, 11.6. They're going to have it's got the vector preview, so we could always start. People could try it out.
Nice.
It'll take a while for people to update to the latest version of MariaDB, though. Good 4 or 5 years, isn't it? Isn't that the kind of rate at which hosts upgrade to the latest version of MariaDB?
Yeah, when Drupal core forces it.
Cool. Are there more questions, maybe?
If you do have questions later, the Hash AI channel in Drupal Slack, a lot of people are really active there and really helpful. The issue queue on the AI module also, yes, particularly if you have a specific issue, with details and stuff. but you probably get a smaller group of us, because I think it's Marcus and I mostly that are subscribed to everything, and maybe a few others. Yeah, so you'll probably get quicker answers from more people on the AI Slack channel, I would guess. Yeah. And then from there, we may suggest to open an issue. Yeah. Good.
Perfect. So I just want to mention again that we have this issue where we can write that you were here. Will try to get all the information from, and maybe also from Scott, the presentation and the video online if we, finger crossed, have recorded it. Let's see. And then I would say I hope to see you next time, and ping me if you want to have a session or something, some ideas also on Drupal on the AI Slack channel. Perfect. Thank you very much. And have
Awesome. Thanks for organizing.
night. No problem. Everything. Bye. Then bye bye. Have a good night.
Bye.